I could feel her warm breath on my face. Even with my eyes closed and just coming out of a dead sleep, I could tell we were almost nose to nose. I slowly opened one eye and confirmed what I already knew. Light reddish-brown hair, big green eyes, and a small nose is what I saw before immediately closing my eye, hoping against hope she hadn't seen it. No such luck, I'd been caught. "Daddy, I know you're awake. I'm hungry," my daughter, Tina Marie, said, lying on my pillow next to me. She had the strangest habit of coming into my bed in the morning, lying down on my pillow and watching me until I would wake up. She has scared the hell out of me on more than one occasion. Do you know what it is like to open your eyes and see someone staring back at you? The first time she did it, I almost had a heart attack. Now it was just something I kind of grew to expect. I'm not saying I liked it, but what was I going to say to her? Don't do that anymore? Like that would have worked? "I'm still asleep," I said in a soft, raspy voice, which was about all I could muster. "Wake me in an hour, then we'll have breakfast." "Daddy, you've got to get up," she said, now kneeling on the bed pushing at my still sleepy body. "You promised to take me shopping today, remember?" Stressing the word remember. "I thought your grandmother did that. She only bought me underwear and stuff like that. She said it was high time you learned how to dress a girl." "Daddy, please, get up," she demanded. "Thanks, Mom," I said quietly under my breath, while my daughter kept trying to rock me awake. On the next push, I slipped my arm under her stomach and rolled her over onto her back. "It looks like someone needs a stomach claw," I said, tickling her stomach and sides. "Oh no, not the Vulcan death grip," I shouted, grabbing both her sides. Laughing joyfully, Tina tried to get away from my craziness. "You see, a million years ago my dad and I used to watch professional wrestling on television. There were these two wrestlers, one of whom would do what was referred to as the stomach claw and the other did the Vulcan death grip. Both were basically the same wrestling move. The wrestler would grab his opponent, make a move to get him on his back, and then in front of a screaming crowd, he'd grab his opponent's stomach or sides with both of his large hands. It was all staged, but the announcer played it up to the hilt. "Oh no, not the stomach claw," the announcer would scream, and the camera would pan to the wrestler with an intense and horrific look on his face. His opponent's face would be all contorted, as if in excruciating pain, all the while slapping the mat with his hand, at which time the attacking wrestler would release him, then stand up and parade around the ring. The referee would hold the gloating wrestler's hand up over his head, designating him the winner. It was so fake, but my dad and I loved it. We would be wrestling around on the living room floor when he'd grab me and say, "Oh no, not the stomach claw," then tickle me until I was about to pee in my pants. My mother would try her best to put a stop to it, but that never seemed to go the way she wanted. "You two are going to wreck something, and I'm going to be very angry," she'd yell, chastising us both. Did it work? Not a chance. My dad usually ran after her while she continued to yell, "Vic, I'm warning you." So he would tickle her instead of me. Afterwards, they would kiss and hug, followed by my dad giving her a swat on the bum. They were in love. My dad was career Navy. Although they lived in the Midwest, 5 years after they got married, my dad joined the Navy. He was gone a lot, being a mechanic on a destroyer, which he called his tin can. The first couple of enlistments, my mom traveled from base to base, following my dad whenever he'd get transferred. However, after 12 years, she found a small house in Minneapolis close to her parents. She got tired of not having any roots and wanted a place to call home. My dad was gone a lot, but when he did come home, it was Christmas, Thanksgiving, and the 4th of July all rolled into one. It wouldn't be the type of life I'd want, but it worked for them. I had a sister, Jenny, who was 10 years older than me, and a brother, Tommy, who was just over 8 years older. I guess you could say I was the oops child. They were supposedly done making babies, but my dad came home on leave. Guess one thing led to another, and that's how I came into the mix. It shocked the hell out of the two of them, especially since they had given away all of their baby stuff years ago. After I was born, my dad came home as often as he could, and after his next 4-year enlistment, just as he had promised my mother, he packed it in after doing nearly 25 years. He got a job as a large engine mechanic, and life at home over the next 10 years was pretty normal. Jenny finished school and went on to college for a couple of years before marrying herself a doctor. Tommy wasn't much for school, but procured a good job working at a corrugated box plant. He was making decent money, moving up the ranks, and finally marrying his high school sweetheart. Me? Well, at 16 I had the world by the tail. I had somehow made the varsity football team as a sophomore, procured me a beautiful girlfriend, and a bunch of friends. Like I said, life was good. Then my world took an ugly twist. "We are moving to Florida," is how my dad phrased it at a Sunday dinner when the rest of the family was there. Sadly, our family no longer included my grandparents. My mother's mother and father both died several years back. "What?" is kind of how we all reacted. I've been offered a good job at the Naval Shipyard in Jacksonville, Florida. I'm sick and tired of all the snow and cold weather during the winters here. I want to be warm for a change. Hell, who wouldn't want to move to Florida if they got the chance? "Me," was the first thing out of my mouth. I gave him all the reasons I should stay, even begging my mom to let me live with Tommy and his wife until I graduated high school, but it made no difference, especially to Dad. "Steve, it's not the end of the world, for goodness sakes. Think about it. Sun, sand, and the beach. It doesn't get any better than that," my dad said, trying to convince me it was the right move. I didn't like it, but in the end I didn't have a choice. Cultural shock is the only way I can describe it. Jacksonville was not Minneapolis, and although it wasn't all that bad, I really missed my friends back in what used to be my hometown. The ocean and beach were nice, but the kids weren't nearly as friendly as the ones I'd left behind. When I went to the beach, there was enough flesh showing I think I walked around with a constant hard-on for the first 3 months. That made Florida more bearable. When they told me I talked funny, I just looked at them thinking, "I talk funny?" It was like I had just stepped into the movie Deliverance with Burt Reynolds. When I made the football team my junior year, that made a big difference. Everything, it seemed, revolved around football in one way or another. I got my first experience that year at just how big a rivalry could be when the Georgia Bulldogs played the Florida Gators in Jacksonville. Hell, they shut down the high schools early so we could go to the rally downtown. Like I said, they take their football seriously in the South. Even within the state itself, there were rivalries. The Miami University Hurricanes, University of Florida Gators, and the Seminoles from Florida State all were in the football top 10 every year. And the times they played one another, watch out. Senior year, I got an early Christmas present. My brother and his family moved down south to be with us. My dad helped get him a job at one of the paper plants. Although he wasn't making quite as much money, the lower cost of living and no state income tax more than made up for it. We were almost a family again. A twisted knee my senior year ended my football career, what there was of it. Luckily, my grades were good enough, so I could go to any college I wanted. I ended up at the University of Florida. I was now a Gator. I love college life, but as my dad put it, "You're there for a reason, and I'm not paying good money for you to party." That was the lecture I got every time I came home. Let's just say I did him proud and leave it at that. I dated on and off throughout college. In my senior year, I was really stuck on a girl named Connie. I was starting to think it was getting serious until she got a job in New York, which finished it for me. So I just dated a little, got a job with a large insurance company back home in Jacksonville, and life went on. Family, work, football, and casual dating filled my days and nights. I bought a small condo in a part of Jacksonville called Arlington. It was only a few miles from the beach. I had the bachelor pad I always thought I wanted. When my brother Tommy's youngest daughter, Christy, was in a school holiday play, it was a non-issue we'd all be there for opening night. Though on a Friday night, it was the last place in the world I wanted to be. My mom said the play was cute. I just thought it was 2 hours of my life I'd never get back. We all went backstage to get his daughter. That's when I met her elementary school teacher. Lana Jean Collins was her name, and she was something else. There were a couple of dozen kids screaming, laughing, and begging for her attention, while she did her best to take care of everyone's issues, or tried to anyway. Christy came running out of the dressing room. "Dad, wasn't I great?" She was beaming. "Come over here. You've got to meet my teacher," she said, dragging my brother across the room. "Miss Collins, this is my dad." She stretched out her hand, saying it was a pleasure to meet him and what a wonderfully talented girl his daughter is. Christy then proceeded to introduce her teacher to our entire clan. When she got to me, I shook her hand, and I guess I forgot to let it go. I couldn't take my eyes off her. "Steve, you can give her hand back to her whenever you're finished with it," my brother said with a laugh. It was only then that I realized I still had her hand in mine. I think I turned a dozen shades of red, stumbling over some type of apology before releasing it. "No problem," she said, smiling at me. "But since I'm right-handed, I'm going to need it for at least a little while longer." We all said what a lovely play it was, and hoped to see it once more this weekend. "Kind of nice looking, isn't she?" my brother asked, walking out to the parking lot with me. "In single too, I understand. But I guess you already noticed she wasn't wearing a wedding ring, seeing as how you couldn't keep your eyes off her." "She's all right, I guess," I shrugged. My non-committal reply obviously fooled no one. My mom snickered, elbowing my dad, telling him that's exactly what he had said about her. She was more than all right, at least in my book. Her strawberry blonde hair shone under the stage lights, and her deep green eyes had put me into a damn trance. I couldn't take my eyes off them. I didn't have a chance to look at the rest of her, but would the next time we met, and there would definitely be a next time. I went to that play again on Saturday night, followed by the Sunday matinee. I made it a point each time to go backstage with Tommy after each performance to pick up Christy, hoping to catch another glimpse of her teacher, Lana. "Steve, you must be a real play junkie," she said, with that sing-song Southern twang in her voice. She was a real Southern belle, born and raised in Alabama, Bama as she called it. Sunday, I made my big move. Christy came out of the dressing room just as I started talking with Lana. I quickly asked her if she was doing anything later that night. "The only thing I want to do tonight is get off my feet, slip into a hot bath, and forget about this long weekend. Why don't you ask me some other time when there isn't so much going on?" I wasn't sure if this was a brush off, but tonight wasn't going to happen. It was almost 3 weeks later before I took another shot at her. I figured after the holidays things would have slowed down a bit. So I looked up her number and tried again. "Lana, this is Steve Moore. We met at the holiday play. I'm Christy Moore's uncle." There was a short pause. Then, "I remember you. You came to all 3 performances, and if my memory serves me right, you asked me out on Sunday. At least I was memorable." "That you were. What can I do for you?" "Well, if you're not busy this weekend, maybe you'd like to go out to dinner or catch a movie or something?" God, I hoped I wasn't sounding too desperate. "That would be lovely. What kind of food do you like to eat?" "Almost anything." I'd never really been asked that question before. "Why don't you pick the restaurant?" "You sure about that?" Now she was starting to scare me. How bad could it be? Food is food, right? No, wrong. Being from the Midwest, grits wasn't normally on my menu. Hell, I'd never even heard of grits before we moved south. Cream of wheat was as close as I'd ever come to it, and don't get me started on greens or hog jowls. I guess there were a few items I didn't like to eat, and over the period of 3 weeks I found out 2 other things. 1, I really liked Lana, and 2, she was a Southern girl through and through who liked down-home Southern-style cooking. How she stayed as thin as she did, I'll never know. Lana was a shade under 5 feet 6 inches and topped the scales at 120 pounds fully dressed. She didn't have big jugs or a round bum, but what she had was more than all right with me. On our 4th date, we went to a church dance. We were the chaperones. We talked a little about religion, her being a Southern Baptist and me being Catholic. To me, it wasn't an issue, but to her, religion was a big part of her life. I'd stopped going to church years ago when I was too old to get in trouble for skipping Mass. Lana, on the other hand, never missed. It didn't take me long to realize why she was still single. She let it be known from the get-go there was going to be no sex before the honeymoon, and I do mean none. There was kissing with and without tongue and hugging with clothes on, but you could forget about petting and don't even think about bringing up the word sex. I was getting frustrated, but I was handling it in a manner of speaking. After our 6th date, I brought her home for one of our Sunday family dinners. Dad was barbecuing chicken breasts on the grill, and Mom and Tommy's wife, Ruth, were in the kitchen making potato salad and baked beans. "Steve, why didn't you tell me everyone was bringing something?" "I could have made something," she said, looking at me a little cross. "Mrs. Moore, I never would have come empty-handed if I'd known. At least let me help you while Steve helps your husband." My mom looked at me and smiled. Lana continued, "Mrs. Moore, you have a lovely home. The next time I'll make sure we bring something to share," she said, glaring at me before I could totally escape. I guess I was dead meat. I left for the sanctuary of the back patio. I simply never thought about bringing anything. I never brought anything. After dinner, the women were talking amongst themselves, clearing the table and putting the food away. So Dad took Tommy and me out back for a cold one. "Looks like you've got a live wire," Tommy said with a snicker. "And I can't wait to see what she brings next time." "Hey, she's a great cook. A little too country at times, but she hasn't poisoned me yet," I responded, valiantly defending my girl. "Well, your mom likes her, that I'm sure of," my dad said, finishing his beer. "So unless you like this girl a lot, I'd keep her away from your mother because you know how she gets when she likes someone. Hell, I thought she was going to dump you for Connie before she left for New York. She has a habit of adopting people she likes." "Dad, I really like this girl a lot, but she's really religious and more than a little conservative." "Conservative?" my dad asked. Before I could answer, Tommy put in his 2 cents worth. "Dad, that means that Steve hasn't even gotten beyond first base yet, and by the sounds of it, isn't going to anytime soon." He laughed, but my dad didn't. "Steve, if you're just looking for a piece of flesh, I don't think this is the girl for you. I think this one is looking for something permanent, if you know what I mean." That's how Lana worked her way into my heart and my mom's. On more than one occasion, after a disagreement with Lana, my mom would bluntly tell me that if I screwed this up, she would never forgive me. "In that case, Mom, why don't you marry her instead of me? Don't get smart with me, young man. You're not too old for a good butt whipping." "Mom, you've never in your entire life given me a butt whipping," I said, grinning at her. "Well, it's not too late to start." I could hear the agitation in her voice. Once, during a family dinner, both my mother and brother were giving me unsolicited advice concerning Lana. "Everyone needs to back off and let him make his own mistakes. That's the only way he's ever going to learn," my dad piped in, looking at my mother and brother. "Yeah, let me make my own mistakes," I replied, glaring back at everyone with a little disdain. "Yeah, let my little brother screw it up, and then when he crashes and burns, we're just going to have to pick up the pieces and put him back together." "I'm not going to screw it up." Well, I wasn't planning on it, anyway. We dated for almost 8 months before she'd even let me have the serious conversation I tried to have with her for the last 2. "Lana, I'm in love with you. I want to plan my future with you in it." "Steve, we hardly know each other. I know all I need to know. What's my favorite color, my favorite food, my mother's maiden name?" she replied all too quickly. "Royal blue, stuffed pork chops, and not a clue. But we have the rest of our lives to find out the other answers together." It took me 2 months and a little help from my mother to convince her I was serious and deeply in love with her. I thought about all the cute ways I could ask her: wrap up the ring in 20 boxes, put it in her glass of wine, or set it on the top of her dessert at a fancy restaurant. None of them felt right, so I just came right out and asked her, ring in hand, at our favorite Mexican restaurant. When she said she needed time to think about it, I was crushed. That night, I walked her to her parents' front door, got a great kiss goodnight, turned around and started slowly walking back to my car, trying to figure out what my next move should be. From over my shoulder, and before I could even turn around, I heard Lana call out, "I've thought about it, and yes, I'll marry you." I bridged the distance in 3 steps, grabbed her, and swung her around on her parents' front porch, gushing that she'd made me the happiest man on earth. "Just because I've said yes, don't you even think about what I know you're thinking about, Mr. Stephen Moore. I'm coming to our marital bed pure as the new fallen snow. You understand?" I understood, but wanted it to happen as soon as possible. Weddings don't happen overnight. Not with Lana, her mom, and my mom planning them. There seemed to be a million details to work out, not the least of which was the honeymoon. "Steve, just nod your head yes when they ask you a question, and we'll all get through this with as little pain as possible," was the advice my dad gave me. "If she asks if you've got any second thoughts, say no, even if you do. And remember, she's always going to be right from the moment you say, 'I do,' so learn to live with that fact." I started to say something, but he stopped me cold. After over 50 years of marriage to the same woman, I must have done something right. "Just believe me when I tell you your days of being right are over." He smiled. I started to get worried. The wedding was in a rose garden by a lake, not far from her parents' house. Our vows were exchanged in a gazebo that was covered with flowers. Her Baptist minister uncle married us, even making us write our own vows. "Tell her what's in your heart," not just what you think she or the rest of us want to hear. Perfect is how it all turned out. My dad shook my hand. My mom hugged me. My sister told me to go slow on our wedding night, and my brother punched me in the arm, telling me that for once I'd done something right. "Screw this up and you'll have me to answer to," he said, as Lana and I got into our car to leave. I refused to tell my new bride where we were going on our honeymoon. The only thing I told her was that it was going to be warm and to bring a lot of casual clothing. I'd saved up more than enough money for what I wanted to do, and that was to have her totally to myself for an entire week. The resort was on the far west side on the island of Cabo, a tiny island in the tropics. And when I say tiny, it was only 3 miles long. It had 8 huts on each side of the island, each strategically placed in such a way that even looking out when we were on our deck, we couldn't see any of the other huts. How did you find this place? On the internet, you can find anything if you know what you're looking for. I just typed in romantic, isolated Caribbean getaways and this, along with 20 other locations, came up. I narrowed down my choices to 3 and finally picked this place. I relayed this to her while looking at the ocean from our deck, holding on to my new bride's hand. "Well, Mr. Moore, you outdid yourself." She wrapped her arms around me and kissed me passionately. "Now, if you don't mind, I'm a little tired, think I'll turn in." I was a little shocked to say the least. With a stunned look on my face, I watched her walk into our hut, alone. Turning back around, she smiled. "Well, husband, are you going to stand there all night? After all, this is our wedding night. Or maybe the morning after," she said, looking at her watch. I'd like to say it was the hottest sex of my life. It wasn't. I'd never been with a virgin before, so I took my sister's advice and went slow, maybe too slow. After enough foreplay to get her hotter than she'd ever been before. "That was worth the wait," my bride said, hugging and kissing me. "Is it what you thought it would be?" What the hell was I going to say? No way. Han, making love with you tonight was something I've never experienced before. "That's good, right?" she said, sitting up in bed. "Not good, great." "Steve, I know I'm not as experienced as the other women you've probably been with, but I'm excited to learn all about what you like to do and experience all the things I've dreamed about all my life. So, I may be inexperienced, but you'll find I'm a fast learner." She smiled, jumped off the bed, and ran over to the small refrigerator. Grabbing a bottle of champagne and 2 glasses, she jumped back into our bed. Pouring 2 large glasses, she handed me one. "To us, may our love do nothing but grow." She sloshed down about half the glass before coming up for air as the bubbles tickled her nose. "I'm sure as hell glad we don't have to go anywhere. Tonight, I want to drink this entire bottle and make love to you until neither one of us can walk." And that's just what we did. For 7 days we slept, walked on the beach, and best of all made love. I'm glad my sister had given her the lover's set from KY, because after 4 days going nonstop, even I was getting a little sore. Life for the two of us was what I dreamed it would be. She got off work at 3:30, so she was always home waiting for me when I walked through the front door. I never tired of her jumping into my arms, kissing me, and asking me what kind of day I'd had. Even if it had been a horrible day, having my bride in my arms made any problem I had miraculously go away. Almost 2 years to the day we got married, Lana surprised me one night when I got home. She was in a sexy outfit. Of course, everything she wore made her look sexy. With a bottle of champagne in her hands, pouring 2 glasses, she gave me a kiss that would have brought the dead back to life. "This will be my last glass for a while," she said, downing it in one gulp and tossing the plastic glass over her shoulder. "So, if you'd like to take advantage of this thin body of mine, you'd better hurry, because soon we're going to have to work around what I anticipate could be a pretty big bump." I still wasn't getting it. "Earth to Steve," she said, kissing me for the 10th time. "Think about it. What happens when a condom breaks like that one did last month?" "Oh my God, you don't mean..." "I see you now get that we are going to be 3 pretty soon." She smiled. I chased her into our bedroom. At least we wouldn't have to worry about birth control for a while. My mom went nuts, like I knew she would. My dad just said life, as I have known it, was coming to an abrupt end. Tina Marie was 7 pounds 3 ounces and had a thick head of light brown hair. After 22 hours of labor, I didn't think she'd ever come out. I was there for the whole thing, and even got to cut the umbilical cord. I was tired, but Lana looked whipped. Tina was the most beautiful baby girl in the world. And that's exactly what I told anyone who would listen. Luckily for the two of us, Tina started sleeping through the night after the first month. Maybe this won't be too bad, I thought, until my dad gave me a little insight. Steve, a baby changes everything, so you'd better get used to it. Your days of doing anything you want, when you want, are now officially over. With a little one, you'll have to plan to go everywhere. I told my dad nothing would change much. He laughed. He was right, I wasn't. Nothing was ever easy or simple again. Just going over to visit with my parents was an ordeal. Food, diapers, 2 changes of clothes was just the half of it. We now kept a bag packed with essentials in case we needed to go somewhere in a hurry. It got better, just not before Tina reached the ripe old age of 5. Even though it was a pain in the bum at times, I wouldn't have given it up for the world. Money was pretty tight for a while, but with us getting raises over the years, life wasn't too bad for the 3 of us. Our schedule centered around the school calendar year, and although Lana had summers off, it wasn't like most people thought. People who think teachers have it made should walk in their shoes for 1 year, and then they'd know what it's like to educate their sons and daughters. Lana worked 1 week after the kids left for their summer vacation, and went back a week before the students returned in the fall. That's the way the contract was written, but she always worked many days on her own getting ready for each new school year. And, no matter what you've heard, they don't get a paid 3-month vacation in the summer. Their vacation is less than 2 months. I know lots of business people who get more vacation than that. Teachers get paid a yearly salary for the actual days they work, which is divided up by the month. So they get their last paycheck a couple of weeks after they leave for the summer and don't get another one until they've been back for 2 weeks. And don't get me started on how little they are paid. Lana and I felt the crunch of those meager paychecks often. Then suddenly our life took a turn. I remember it like it was yesterday. It was April, and we were coming up on 8 years together. Lana caught a cold that she couldn't shake. It started out like any normal common cold, but then went into bronchitis-like symptoms. She went to the doctor she'd been going to see since moving to Florida as a kid. He was a general practitioner in a clinic with 2 other doctors. I think he did more reminiscing than doctoring during her first visit. He prescribed an antibiotic and some strong cough medicine. He told her to take it easy for about a week. After a couple of weeks, when she didn't seem to get better, I started to get concerned. "Han, you should go back to the doctor and get checked out again," I told my stubborn wife. "Steve, it's just the start of a summer cold, that's all. I used to get them all the time. If it doesn't get better soon, I'll go back and get checked out again. The only time it really bothers me is when I lay down to sleep at night." She did get better after a couple more weeks, but still had a dry, throat-clearing cough that hung on. Finally, after badgering her to death, she went in and the good Dr. James prescribed some codeine cough medicine this time. As strong as it was, no one would be able to cough with that stuff in their system. She again got better but was still tired. I found out much later she also had body aches on and off. That summer we had the greatest summer vacation ever. A good friend of mine had a condo on the beach with a 22-foot speedboat docked in a marina on the Intercoastal Waterway. He gave me a great deal. We frolicked in the surf during the day, and most afternoons I took them both out for rides up and down the coast. Lana screamed I was going to kill us all, while our 5-year-old daughter yelled to go faster. We cooked and ate breakfast and lunch in the condo. However, I made it a point to take everyone out for dinner at night. There were plenty of restaurants in the area. Most were reasonably priced and not very busy in the midsummer months. Hell, the snowbirds wouldn't hit for another 6 to 8 weeks. "We should buy a place on the beach," Lana said wistfully, cuddling up to me on the balcony one night, looking out at the ocean. "We could rent it out during the height of the tourist season and use it ourselves the rest of the time. Then when we retire, we could live there because it will already be paid for." It was a nice dream, and I gave her the task of checking it out. "You really mean it?" "Sure, why not? But I think you're going to find everything is a little out of our current budget." "Well, it doesn't have to be anything plush like this. All we really need is a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom place with a kitchen and family room of some type. You look at what's available and I'll push the numbers, but right now there is something else I'd like to push your way." "Sir, are you propositioning me? You do know I'm married and love my husband to death," she said in her twangiest southern drawl. Well, little lady, I've got this problem, and I know you're just the woman to take care of it for me. I put her hand on my crotch. Mr. Moore, are you trying to corrupt me? I believe I've already done that. Just want to see what you've learned. Lana always said she was a fast learner. I was the happiest man on earth. I had the most beautiful woman in the world, a daughter that made my heart skip a beat, and a life most men dream of. In 3 words, I was lucky. When Lana's cough came back, Dr. James was out of town, so one of the other doctors in the clinic saw her. He gave her 2 more refills of her cough medicine and put her on another round of antibiotics, something called a Z-Pack, saying this would knock out anything she had in her system. That lasted almost 3 months, and then we went through a week of her sleeping sitting up. Enough already. I told her one Monday morning when school was closed for some holiday. We're going to the doctor and get this taken care of once and for all. With my daughter staying with my mom, we headed out to the same stupid clinic. Mondays are the worst day of the week to see a doctor, especially if you don't have an appointment and there is no school. 2 hours later, we were ushered into an examination room where we waited another half an hour before the 3rd doctor in the practice finally honored us with his presence. What seems to be the problem, Mrs. Moore? She's had the same damn cough on and off for the last 5.5 months. The codeine cough medicine that was prescribed helped, but it came back as soon as she ran out of it. He looked at me and then at Lana. Why don't you hop up here? He gestured to the examination table, and let's take a listen. He listened to her chest, front to back, asking her to breathe deep and cough for him. He then took another look at her file. There is something there, and it could be pneumonia, but I'm not sure. Just to be on the safe side, I think we'll get a couple of chest x-rays. I was starting to feel a little bit better. They were now treating her instead of just pushing drugs. Get with the receptionist, and she'll set up the x-ray. You don't do them here? I asked. Not anymore. The X-ray center is just across the street. Most of the time you can just walk in and have it done. Have my receptionist call for an appointment just in case. It didn't make any difference because we weren't going to leave until we got one done. An hour and a half later, we were headed to Walgreens to fill 2 more prescriptions. It was 4:30 before we finally got home. We had spent the entire day going from clinic to clinic, but maybe now we will find out what she had. Another set of x-rays, a mammogram, an ultrasound, and an upper body MRI rounded out Lana's tests the following week. Yet we knew little more than we did 2 weeks ago. When the doctor wanted to schedule a consultation with another doctor, a specialist, to go over all her test results, I lost it. We're not taking another test or seeing another doctor until you tell us what's going on. Do I make myself clear? I wasn't trying to be being an a-hole. I was just tired of being jacked around. Mr. Moore, we just want to be 100% sure before we say what we think it is, the doctor said, without any emotion in his voice. There are 2 different kinds of masses, one in each breast that were detected on your wife's mammogram and confirmed with the ultrasound. The X-ray detected another in her lower right lung. We just wanted to get all the test results back before we said anything. However, the only way to be 100% sure is to do biopsies to confirm our diagnosis. We need to talk with the radiologist who will perform them. Dr. Patra saw us at 10:15 Wednesday morning. He looked at all the tests and agreed we needed to do the procedures. They would perform the biopsies on both her breasts and her lung the same day. Immediately following the lung biopsy, she would have another x-ray of her right lung. Mr. and Mrs. Moore, it's a simple procedure where we take core samples from each mass in the breasts and in the lung and send them out for analysis. The procedure will take about an hour and a half since we are doing all the procedures at the same time. After the biopsy, she will need to have a lung x-ray to ensure we got the right spot. We should have all the test results back within 5 days. Can you do it today? I almost shouted at him. Not today, but this week for sure. For the next 2 days, we were both a wreck. I tried to stay positive and put on a brave face for my wife, but it was hard. Honey, it's probably nothing. One's probably a cyst, and the other is just scaring from your pneumonia. What if it's cancer? I could hear the fear in her voice. No one has said anything about cancer. But Steve, what if it is? Well, we'll deal with it when we get the test results. It took most of the morning to do the biopsies and have the x-ray. I wanted to be in the room just to hold her hand, but they told me it would be too crowded with everyone else who needed to be in there. So I sat in the procedure waiting room praying that it wasn't what we both feared. She came out from the biopsy before going to have the x-ray still in her gown, holding a bag of frozen peas on each breast. How did it go? Did it hurt? I felt a little pressure, that's about it. They took 4 to 5 samples from each area and we should know in 3 or 4 days. I was able to go with her to the x-ray room, but again had to wait outside the door. Neither one of us wanted to address the issue, especially when Tina was in the room. Though I was optimistic, I couldn't help thinking about what we'd do if the test came back positive. After 2 days, I was nuts, and Lana? She paced nonstop at home, and how she was handling it at school, I couldn't imagine. Why can't they just give us the results over the phone? Why do we have to go into their office? This can't be good, my wife said, almost in tears. Han, they said they wanted the doctor to go over the results with us. That doesn't mean it's bad news, just standard procedure. Now I was expecting the worst, and praying with all my might I was wrong. There was a lot of crying 5 minutes after the doctor joined us in his consultation room. He patiently waited until my wife settled down and got control of herself. He'd probably gone through this hundreds of times before. Mrs. Moore, it's bad, but it's curable, which brought on another crying spell. It was 10 minutes before he could start again. She had 2 different types of cancer, one type in her breasts, the other a more aggressive type in her lung. There was no way to tell for certain exactly how long either had been growing, but it had been a while. We talked about the surgery, the recovery, and the chemo and radiation she'd have to endure afterwards. We're going to be as aggressive as the cancer is, and make no mistake, we will beat this. I was glad he was so optimistic. Someone had to be. We made the appointment with the surgeon for the following Friday. We were told the rest of the appointments would be made a couple of weeks after the surgery took place. The only thing that remained was to tell our daughter. Tina understood as much as 5.5-year-old could. Though we kind of whitewashed the severity of Lana's condition and stage 4 was never mentioned, we didn't make it sound like a walk in the park. However, we didn't give her all the details either. She had questions, most of them dealing with what would happen afterwards and what she could do to help. This was now a family affair. I didn't make love to my wife that night. I just wrapped my arms around her, pulled her in tight, and held her as she let it all out, offering as much comfort as I could. There was nothing I could say or do that could fix this. I just needed to assure her I would always be there for her. Her tears kept my chest wet that night, while mine drowned the inside of my brain, as I tried my best not to let any escape. I was losing it but told myself I had to be the strong one, even if I knew I was only fooling myself. The woman in my arms was my life. I wanted to pick her up, right now, tonight, and run away from this as far as we could, but that was just wishful thinking on my part. No, this was something we would have to stand, fight, and win together. There was no other way. So after 5 horrific days, in the darkness of our bedroom we connected, bonded, and stayed as one, like we always had. Are you still going to find me attractive after they cut these off? She asked, touching her breasts. I told her she meant more to me than some stupid breasts. She smiled, but I could tell it was forced. Neither one of us got much sleep over the next couple of days. Every once in a while, I would wake up and look over at my wife. She'd be lying there on her back with her eyes open. I would reach over, rub her arm, and give her a light kiss. There were no smiles at 3 o'clock in the morning. Wednesday we went in for her pre-surgery physical. Looking at my wife I could see she was still in denial. I wished I was too. They explained exactly what they were going to do and approximately how long the surgery would take. The surgery was scheduled for 7 o'clock Friday morning. We went home with a list of do's and don'ts for the following day. I know she didn't sleep Thursday night. Hell, we didn't even go to bed until after midnight. We talked, she cried, and I did my best to try and convince her it would be all right. Friday I kissed my wife and watched her and a nurse walk down the hall together. I was shown to the waiting room and told that the doctor would be down after the surgery, which should take about 3 hours plus or minus. At 3.5 hours I started questioning why it was taking so long. It was just after 4 hours when Dr. Reynolds finally showed up. He shook my hand and motioned for me to sit. There was more than we originally thought, is how he started our conversation. It had progressed into her lymph nodes, so we had to take most of the nodes under each arm besides her breasts. We removed about 30% of her right lung, but we believe we got it all. She's going to be pretty sore for a couple of weeks. Listen, no matter what, I'm confident she will make a full recovery." I was in shock. He said I could see her when she came out of recovery, which should be in about an hour and a half. She was pretty much out of it throughout the day and into the night, so I just sat by her bed and held her hand. I felt sad because there wasn't a damn thing I could do for her. Our life going forward was going to drastically change, but I knew together we'd make it. We were a team. At 2 in the morning, I felt her stir. The nurses had been in to check on her almost every hour. Lana had either slept through it or wasn't quite all there. "How are you feeling?" I asked. Then I thought about what the hell I just said. It was a stupid question, except at the moment that's all I could think of. "I love you," I added. She smiled, licking her lips. I poured her a glass of water and gave her a little through a straw. She was still feeling the after effects of the anesthesia. I told her to rest. We'd talk later. She took one look at all the wires and tubes going into each arm, shook her head and, I think, fell back asleep. I told everyone to stay away until at least Sunday. She needed rest, and there would be plenty of time later for visiting. I was able to sneak Tina in Saturday night, and we had a little family get-together with the door closed. It helped Tina to see that her mom was okay. I was sorry. Tina was sorry. Everyone was sorry. That is, except the doctors who had blown it since day one. And if I heard the phrase, "Doctors are human and make mistakes too," once more I was going to puke. My anger grew each time I took Lana to chemo and watched her lose whatever was in her stomach afterwards. Life sucked. When she lost all her hair, Tina said we should both shave our heads. We were about to do it until Lana stopped us. She said it was bad enough one of us was bald and couldn't do anything about it. She let it be known she would be angry if we did it, so we relented and all bought matching hats. The test results after her 3rd round of chemo came back looking pretty damn positive, which lifted all our spirits. Instead of going out to dinner, I brought in Chinese and the 3 of us celebrated. We'd beaten it and life was going to go back to where it was before this nightmare began. Well, that was the plan. Lana had been working part-time, and sometimes even that was too much for her. But after getting a clean bill of health, it seemed to re-energize her, and 4 months later she was back teaching full-time. She even talked about reconstructive breast surgery. I told her if and when she was ready. It was not important to me, as long as she was healthy again. Everyone said she was the poster child for breast cancer, and even though she had 2 different types of cancer, she had beaten the odds. Her cancer was gone, or at least in remission. When the test results came back clean 6 months later, she started talking again about that condo on the beach. We'd gotten stung pretty good with medical bills, even with insurance, but the more she talked, the more I wanted to make it happen for her. We didn't consider timeshares or stuff like that, and found being even 1 block off the ocean made one hell of a difference in price. My brother was the one who found it. It was a 4-plex that was going into foreclosure. When we first looked at it, I thought it should have been condemned. It was a block in from the ocean, was big, needed everything, and still way out of our price range. My dad was the one who called the family meeting. It's a wreck and probably overpriced at that, but with a little hard work it could be a great investment. I've already talked with Jenny, and she and David said they would be in for 25% if we decide to move on it. It would be like our own private beach house. I think we'll even be able to put a deck on the roof, so we'll not only be able to see the ocean, but with the roof being 3 stories high, we should have a pretty decent view in every direction. The look Lana gave me said it all. There was no way I could refuse her after what she'd gone through. We opened up a bottle of wine, and Tommy and I decided to let Dad do the bargaining. Thank God, we did. It was touch and go with the owner, but with him dropping his price $30,000 and us putting second mortgages on all our homes, 90 days later we were the proud owners of our own money pit. We're going to do only what has to be done right now, my dad announced, as we looked at the long list of things that had to be eventually done. We'd taken on a daunting task, and sometimes over the next year and a half I wished we hadn't. I was tired of scrimping and wanted to splurge just once in a while. "Steve, we can't go out tonight. We've got to use that money for the hardwood floors that are coming next week." She was a tough money manager. When I secretly sold a few childhood mementos, I bought my wife a new dress and took her to dinner, though kicking and screaming. "Steve, you're wasting money that could be better used elsewhere." "I know, but I just had to do this." We had great sex that night. The first night we actually stayed at our beach house was wonderful. We packed a picnic lunch and ate up on the newly constructed roof deck. Looking through her binoculars, Tina said she thought she saw a pod of dolphins. I kind of doubted that. After Tina went asleep, we christened our new bedroom. We had running water, toilets, air mattresses for beds, but few other creature comforts. Who cared? We were happy. A week later, after church, I took my two favorite women out for brunch. The Sea Turtle Hotel was located right on Neptune Beach, and the restaurant had a wall of windows facing the ocean. We got a table right next to the windows and started to enjoy their buffet. At These's prices, eat as much as you want, and what's left we'll stuff in Mom's purse, I told my daughter as we made our way through the line. 45 minutes later, I was stuffed, but happy. "Look, Dad, dolphins," Tina said, with a little glee in her voice. There they were, two bottlenose dolphins moving up the coast, and then we saw him. It was a lone swimmer out about 35 yards from shore. He saw the fins on the dolphins and thought they were something else. He started swimming towards shore like his life depended on it. He wasn't that great of a swimmer, and the splashing and noise he was making got more than a few people's attention, as the dolphins were almost upon him. Everyone there knew what the guy was thinking, and after what must have been only a minute and a half, a totally exhausted man flopped face down in the sandy shore. "Do you think we should tell him?" a man at the table next to ours said out loud. "No, let him think he survived a near-death experience. He'll have a great story to tell his friends and family. Why ruin it for him?" Everyone went back to their meals, but I knew how lucky he must have been feeling about now. At the 2-year mark, we were close to completing all the major items on our beach house list. When we first bought the fourplex, we had a blind draw to pick which unit would be our own home away from home. Lana and I got the top left unit just above my folks. Tommy drew the unit next to mine, and my sister got the one that was left. We opened up a bottle of champagne and toasted our good luck. Luck, it's a strange word because it swings both ways. You've got good luck, and then there is the other kind, which never seemed to leave us alone. Just before her 3rd annual visit with her oncologist, Lana had lost a little weight, often saying she was not hungry. She sometimes felt weak, but we thought it was just because she was not eating well and working nonstop at our beach house or at her school. She had been cancer-free for 3 years, and although you never forget, it was finally starting to be something from our past. The week before her doctor's appointment, she went for a full body scan. Her doctor called it a PET scan just to make sure nothing was going on. Her doctor was going to discuss the results of the scan at her appointment. She didn't call me at work after her appointment like she normally did. I considered her yearly appointment with her oncologist now just a formality, something her overly protective doctor required, like the PET scan. I was just getting ready to walk into a staff meeting when the receptionist said she had a call holding for me on line 1. "Connie, take a message, will you?" "Steve, it's your mother-in-law." "All right, send it over to my desk. Please tell the rest of the people at the meeting I'll be there in a minute." "Hi, Helen. How are you and Rob doing?" "Steve, you've got to come home right now." "Helen, I'm just walking into a meeting. Tell Lana I'll be home about 4:30. "Steve, you have to leave now." She was starting to get on my nerves. She'd always been a little pushy, but this was going beyond even her normal self. "Helen," was all I got out this time when she hit me with the bomb. "Steve, will you shut up and listen for a second? Lana's cancer is back." I was dumbstruck. A brief word with my boss, and I was out the door almost running. Thank God. My car knew the way home because my mind refused to totally comprehend what I'd just been told. 3 seconds after walking through the front door, I was holding my sobbing wife, trying to make out what she was telling me between her crying bouts. The one word I did make out made me also start to cry. We stayed that way for probably 20 more minutes before moving to the couch. Lana was still having a difficult time talking, so I sucked it up, put on a brave face, and started lying through my teeth. "It can't be right. You've been clean all this time. It's got to be what they call a false positive, that's all." "But what if it's not?" she said, trying her best to stop crying. "Then we'll beat it the same way as we did before together." She looked at me with such sadness in her eyes. My heart about broke. "Steve, I don't think I have it in me to go through all that again." "Lana Moore, I don't want to hear any talk like that. Do you honestly think I'd let anything happen to you? As God is my witness, you and I are going to be living in our beach house this year and for many years to come. You have my word on that." She smiled, But that was the last smile I saw for a hell of a long time. They all had their own ideas why cancer may have come back. It didn't make any difference why. I just wanted to know what they were going to do about it. A biopsy confirmed our worst fears. Lana had lymphoma, and for the second time went under the knife. Everyone in her elementary school sent cards and stuffed animals, telling her to hurry back. This time, however, she never went back. I laid my wife to rest in a small private cemetery plot near her beloved beach. Before she died, she had fought like a woman possessed. We all did. We sold our condo in town and moved into the beach house full-time. Just looking out at the water gave her a sense of peace when little else did. My mom said I was a rock for my wife and Tina, but inside I died right along with her. She lost weight no matter what we did, and the chemo hit her extra hard this time around. Tina and I both shaved our heads, which put a little smile on her face. Only it was too little, too late, for the three of us. I yelled and screamed, pleading with anyone who would listen that there had to be something else we could do. I badgered her doctors. Isn't there some new experimental drug floating around we could try? I wasn't giving up and was mortified they were. I fought calling in hospice until the very end. When they show up, that means there is no hope left, and I wasn't about to let her go. Not just yet. I made a comfortable area for us up on the roof deck, and every night I would carry my wife up the stairs where we would spend an hour or two watching the sun go down, enjoying one another's company. I prayed to God to let me wake up from this nightmare, but like all my other prayers, it went unanswered. Walking with my dad one day on the beach, he told me it was time. "Steve, you have to let her go, for her sake and your daughter's. Hospice will make her remaining time peaceful, without any pain." I knew he was right, but this was my wife we were talking about. How could I let her go? I was in denial. This couldn't be happening, not to her, not to us. I pleaded. I bargained. I shouted at Lana's God. I told him I would do anything if only he would make her well. In my anger, I wondered how this God that Lana believed in so deeply, that was supposed to be so kind and loving like Lana said, could play this cruel trick on such a wonderful person as she. My mother said I was going through the stages of grief. I retaliated, saying I didn't care what it was called. I only wanted my wife to be whole again. Through it all, Lana held fast to her faith. She said it gave her some measure of comfort and peace. I was glad for her because I was in hell. Her last days were both tranquil and sad. I was glad she was at peace and finally without pain, though I was racked with it. Those last 2 days, I never slept a wink. I wanted every available second with her. "Steve, I'm scared," Lana said, during one of her few lucid moments while looking up at me from her bed. "I'm leaving the two best things that ever happened to me." She was so weak it came out in a voice just above a whisper. "I know you're going to be strong, if for no other reason than for our daughter. You're going to have to be both parents now." I held her feeble hands. "And you have to promise me that every night, before she goes to sleep, you kiss her for me. Tell her that she was the most important thing in my life, and that I'll always be watching over her." She was too weak to even cry anymore, but I did see a single tear drip down her cheek. God, I love this woman. Somewhere around 3:30 in the morning, with me sitting on the side of her bed and Tina asleep in a chair by her bed, Lana took her final breath and we died together. We were looking into each other's eyes when the ends of her mouth turned up slightly and she closed her eyes and passed on to what I hoped was something better. I did nothing for the next hour. When I woke our daughter, I told her mommy had passed on and was no longer with us. She cried. I cried. And we spent the next 20 minutes holding each other looking at our wife and mother. How the nurse knew Lana had died, I'm not sure. Maybe it was the lack of noise or she heard our tears hitting the floor. I don't know, but she walked in, checked for a pulse that wasn't there, and took charge. The funeral was supposed to be small and simple. I hadn't counted on every one of her students, past and present, and fellow teachers attending, along with most members of her church. More people than you could have imagined loved her. I was going to say a few words and tried my best to get them out, but my dad ended up having to finish what I started. It was just family and the minister at the gravesite. We put flowers on the coffin and threw a handful of dirt on it when it was lowered into the cold concrete vault. A half hour later, we were at my parents' house watching food being served. Everyone was sorry, so they told me, and if I heard another person say at least I had my daughter, I was going to scream. Taking me out on the back deck, my dad gave me a beer and a chair. "I thought you might need a little air." He was right about that. You may tell me I'm full of shit when I say it's going to get easier and easier every day, but it's true. We will do everything in our power to help you with Tina, but she's going to need you, not us. Tell her you love her and that you are going nowhere. And when you get up in the morning and feel you can't do it any longer, dig down deep and remember you're doing this for Lana too. I had always seen my dad as a hard rock, but today he opened up his heart to me and gave me what I needed to get through the next couple of months. Smells, that's what I lived for now. I didn't touch her side of the bed for the first month. Every night I would fall asleep on what used to be her side. With her pillow over my face, I would close my eyes, inhale her scent, and pretend she was still there with me. Sometimes my brain would even cooperate, and I'd have a dream about her. We had shared a large walk-in closet, so even my clothes had a hint of her essence. I wanted to kill my mom when she came in one day and washed all my bedding. I lost another piece of her. In a way, it did get easier. I no longer wanted to lie down and die to be with my wife. Tina went back to school, and when she made the honor roll, she said she did it for her mom. My family took care of what I couldn't, but after 9 months, they stopped giving me any more slack. My brother told me to get laid, and if it had to be an escort, so be it. I told him I wasn't interested and went back to feeling sorry for myself, which consisted of making myself and everyone around me miserable. The one thing I did do, though, was to turn the law firm of Collins, and Hathaway loose on everyone who had ever touched my wife. I wasn't looking for any big payday. I just wanted them to remember my wife's name every time they went to shrug off a patient without putting much credence in what was being said. I had promised Lana I wouldn't sue her doctors,